Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the viewing port of the transport ship, watching the strange blue-green world grow larger ahead of them. Kepler 442b looked peaceful from space, with its swirling white clouds and two small moons. But Sarah knew that looks could be deceiving. After 30 years in the Earth Defense Force, she had learned not to trust anything that seemed too good to be true. "Admiral, we're getting final clearance from the orbital station," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the communications console. "They're directing us to Docking Bay 7. Sarah nodded but kept her eyes on the planet below. 3 months ago, the message had arrived at Earth's capital. The Galactic Consortium wanted to talk peace. After decades of Cold War border fights and tension, the 12 alien species that ruled most of known space were offering humanity a treaty. It was the opportunity Earth had been waiting for, but it also felt wrong. "Dr. Webb, what do you think?" "Of their choice of meeting place?" Sarah asked the man standing beside her. Dr. Marcus Webb was Earth's best expert on alien behavior. He had spent 20 years studying every species in the consortium. Webb adjusted his glasses and frowned. "Kepler 442b is technically neutral territory, Admiral. No species claims it. But it's awfully close to 3 major consortium military bases. If I were planning a trap, this is where I'd set it." "My thoughts exactly." Sarah turned to face her team. 12 humans against representatives from 12 alien species. The odds had never been in humanity's favor, but somehow they had survived. This long. The docking process took an hour. The consortium station was massive, bigger than anything humans had ever built. As their shuttle moved through the docking tube, Sarah could see alien ships of every design, sleek Veltar cruisers, massive Torg battleships, and the crystal-like vessels of the Harmony Collective. Ambassador Williams, the lead diplomat, was reviewing his notes one more time. "The initial offer seems generous, Admiral. Trade routes, technology sharing, even some territorial concessions in the outer ring. Almost too generous." "That's what worries me," Sarah replied. She had read the preliminary treaty documents 3 times. The consortium was offering humanity things they had been fighting for decades to achieve. Either the aliens had suddenly become very friendly, or they were planning something. The docking clamps engaged with a heavy thunk. Through the porthole, Sarah could see alien figures waiting in the bay. Tall, graceful Veltar with their silver skin, stocky Torg in their environmental suits, and others she recognized from intelligence reports. "Remember the mission brief?" Sarah told her team. "We're here to negotiate, but we keep our eyes open. Trust nothing, question everything, and assume we're being watched at all times." The airlock opened, and humanity stepped onto alien ground. The consortium delegation was led by Supreme Arbiter Kethvar, a Veltar whose silver skin had the deep polish that came with age and authority. He stood, nearly 8 feet tall, with the characteristic elongated limbs and large eyes of his species. When he spoke, his voice had the musical quality that all Veltar possessed. "Admiral Chen, Ambassador Williams, honored guests of humanity," Kethvar said, spreading his 4 arms in what humans had learned was a gesture of welcome. "We greet you in the spirit of peace and cooperation." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Supreme Arbiter, we appreciate the consortium's invitation. Humanity hopes these talks will lead to a better future for all species." The ceremonial greetings took another hour. Each species had its own rituals, and diplomacy required showing respect for all of them. Sarah endured the crystal song of the Harmony, the ritual combat dance of the Crix, and the meditation circle of the Zentar. It was all very civilized and proper. Too proper, perhaps. Dr. Webb was taking notes on everything, just as he always did. But Sarah noticed he was using a special pen, one with a tiny camera built into it. He was recording not just what the aliens said, but how they moved, how they looked at each other, how they breathed. The humans were given quarters in the station's diplomatic wing. The rooms were comfortable, with furniture adjusted for human size and artificial gravity set to Earth normal. Sarah's room even had a viewport showing the planet below. "Too comfortable," she muttered to herself as she checked the room for listening devices. She found 3. That evening, the first formal session began in the station's Great Hall. The chamber was circular, with each species having their own section. Humans sat in simple chairs while the Torg delegation used massive stone blocks, and the crystal beings of the Harmony had no furniture at all. Supreme Arbiter Kethavar stood at the center of the room. For too long, our species have viewed each other with suspicion. The consortium extends its hand to humanity not as conquerors but as partners. The treaty terms were even better than the preliminary offer. Humanity would gain access to consortium trade networks. They would receive technological exchanges that could advance Earth's science by centuries. Most importantly, the constant military pressure on human colonies would end. "This is unprecedented," Ambassador Williams whispered to Sarah during a break. "They're offering us everything we've ever wanted." Sarah watched the alien delegations. They seemed pleased, confident. The Torg war leader was actually smiling, which was something Torg rarely did. The Krix delegation kept making their clicking sounds that indicated satisfaction. Dr. Webb approached them during the break. "Admiral, I need to show you something," he said quietly. "The behavioral patterns are all wrong." He led them to a quiet corner and opened his notebook. "Look at these readings. Veltar normally shows stress through changes in their skin color. It gets darker. But Kethavar's skin has been getting lighter all day. That usually means excitement or anticipation." "Maybe he's excited about peace," Williams suggested. Webb shook his head. "Not this kind of excitement. This is the same pattern I observed when studying Veltar hunters before they made a kill. And look at the Torg delegation." He pointed across the room. "See how they keep checking their risk computers? Torg only do that when they're coordinating military actions." Sarah felt a cold weight in her stomach. "What about the others?" "The Krix are displaying mating colors, which they only do when they're anticipating a great victory. The Harmony Collective keeps humming in B-flat minor, their death song, and the Zentar haven't entered meditation even once today. For a species that meditates constantly, that suggests they're preparing for violence." The pieces were falling into place. Sarah had suspected a trap from the beginning, but the evidence was mounting. "How long do we have?" "The ceremony to sign the final treaty is in 6 days, Webb said. "Based on these behavioral patterns, I'd guess that's when they plan to make their move." Sarah nodded. She had been hoping her suspicions were wrong, but Dr. Webb's observations confirmed her fears. The generous treaty offers, the perfect location, the comfortable accommodations, it was all designed to make humanity lower their guard. "What do we do?" Williams asked. He looked pale. As a diplomat, he had believed in the possibility of genuine peace. "We play along," Sarah said. "We act like we suspect nothing. We negotiate in good faith, and we use every second of the next 6 days to figure out exactly what they're planning." She looked around the Great Hall at the alien delegates. They thought they were clever. They thought humans were naive and trusting. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had always been its paranoia. Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. The aliens wanted to play games? Fine. But they were playing against a species that had survived ice ages, world wars, and the journey to the stars by assuming the worst about everyone and everything. The consortium thought they were setting a trap. They had no idea they were walking into one. The second day of negotiations began with a tour of the station. Supreme Arbiter Kethavar personally guided the human delegation through what he called the greatest achievement of interspecies cooperation in galactic history. Admiral Sarah Chen walked beside him, nodding politely at his explanations while her eyes catalogued every detail. The station was indeed impressive. Over 50 levels, housing nearly 1 million beings, with advanced technology that made human engineering look primitive. But Sarah was not interested in being impressed. She was looking for weaknesses. "The central core contains our main computer systems," Kethavar explained as they passed a heavily guarded section. "All station operations are controlled from there. Security, life support, communications, everything runs through the central network." Dr. Webb asked innocent questions about the computer systems while secretly scanning with a device hidden in his medical bag. Behind them, Lieutenant Rodriguez was taking pictures with a camera disguised as a water bottle. Every member of the human delegation had been trained for intelligence gathering. The defensive capabilities are minimal, of course, HFY continued. This is a diplomatic facility. We have only basic shields and a small security force. Sarah almost smiled at the lie. Her enhanced vision, a military implant that the aliens didn't know about, could see energy signatures throughout the station. There were weapon emplacements hidden behind decorative panels. The civilian areas were filled with soldiers in disguise, and those basic shields were powerful enough to stop a fleet. During lunch, Dr. Webb shared his findings with the team through hand signals they had learned before the mission. Hidden weapons everywhere, at least 3 companies of soldiers. Energy readings suggested much more military hardware than they were being shown. Ambassador Williams looked sick. They're going to kill us all, aren't they? That seems to be the plan, Sarah replied calmly. She had expected this. The question was what humanity could do about it. That afternoon, the negotiations continued. The consortium representatives presented more generous offers. Access to their medical technology could extend human lifespans by decades. Their energy systems could solve Earth's power needs forever. Their terraforming knowledge could turn dead worlds into gardens. All we ask in return, said Supreme Arbiter HFY, is humanity's commitment to peace, a promise to end the conflicts that have troubled our borders. Sarah translated this in her head. They wanted humanity to lower its defenses, to recall the battle fleets, to make Earth and the colonies vulnerable. While the aliens talked, Sarah activated a device hidden in her uniform collar. It looked like a simple communication badge, but it was actually a quantum transmitter. The signal would reach Earth instantly, regardless of distance. 3 taps. Pause. 5 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Code Omega. The trap is confirmed. Proceed with the backup plan. 24 hours later, Earth received the signal. Admiral Marcus Thompson, Sarah's oldest friend and the head of Earth Defense Command, read the message and immediately activated protocols that had been planned for months. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the assembled fleet commanders, Operation Honest Abe is now active. Honest Abe was named after Abraham Lincoln's famous quote, "You can fool all the people some of the time and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time." It was humanity's response to the possibility that the peace treaty was a trap. Across human space, ships began moving. Not the obvious warships that the consortium was watching, but the hidden ones. Freighters that were actually disguised battleships. Mining platforms that were really weapons platforms. Civilian transports filled with Marines instead of passengers. The plan had 3 parts. First, make the consortium think their trap was working. Second, gather intelligence on their technology and tactics. Third, be ready to hit back harder than they could possibly imagine. Back on the station, Sarah's team was doing their part. Dr. Webb had identified the behavioral patterns of each alien species when they were preparing for combat. The Veltar, skin changes. The Torg, coordination signals. The Krix, victory displays. He was documenting everything in what looked like a simple research journal. Lieutenant Rodriguez had mapped the station's layout and identified all the hidden weapons. He did this by pretending to be fascinated by the architecture and asking for detailed tours of interesting areas. Commander Singh, who was officially listed as a security advisor, was actually one of Earth's best Special Forces operators. She had been studying the alien guards, learning their patrol routes and equipment. She even made friends with some of them, using her natural charm to extract information about their training and tactics. Meanwhile, other human operatives worked on different missions. Engineer Park, disguised as a trade representative, was analyzing alien technology and looking for weaknesses. Dr. Santos, the mission's medical officer, was secretly studying alien biology to find information that might be useful in combat. On the 3rd day, something interesting happened. A consortium supply ship arrived at the station, carrying what appeared to be diplomatic gifts for the ceremony. But Sarah's enhanced vision could see through the containers. They weren't gifts, they were weapons, advanced alien weapons being stockpiled for the trap. That night, Sarah sent another quantum signal to Earth. This time, the message was more detailed, transmitted in a code that looked like routine diplomatic reports. The consortium had at least 12 cloaked warships in the system. They were planning to strike during the signing ceremony, when all the human leadership would be in one room. Simultaneously, fleets hidden near Earth and the colonies would attack. The goal was complete destruction, not just of the human government, but of human civilization. Admiral Thompson read the report and smiled grimly. The consortium was thorough. He had to give them that. They had planned for every contingency they could think of. Unfortunately for them, humans were very good at thinking of contingencies that others missed. On the fourth day, Dr. Webb made his most important discovery. While analyzing alien behavior patterns, he noticed something the consortium didn't realize they were revealing. Each species had its own way of communicating with their fleets. The Veltar used subtle skin color changes that their distant ships could read through telescopic cameras. The Torg used tapping patterns on their wrist computers. The Krix used scent markers that their ships could detect even in space. By observing the alien delegates, Webb could tell when they were sending orders to their fleets. More importantly, he could tell what kinds of orders they were sending. The attack command would be unmistakable when it came. Sarah was impressed. "Can you intercept their communications?" "Better than that," Webb replied. "I can predict them. Each species follows patterns based on their psychology. I can tell you what they're going to order before they give the command." This was the breakthrough humanity needed, not just to know the attack was coming, but to know exactly when and how it would happen. On the fifth day, Sarah sent her final report to Earth. The ceremony would begin at 1400 hours, station time. The trap would spring at 1430, just as she reached for the pen to sign the treaty. The signal to attack the colonies would go out at 1435. Admiral Thompson read the message and nodded. "All stations, this is Control. Operation Honest Abe moves to final phase. All assets report ready status." Across human space, the responses came back. "Ready, ready, ready." The consortium thought they were hunting sheep. They were about to discover they had cornered a pack of wolves. On the station, Sarah's team prepared for the ceremony. They had their dress uniforms cleaned and pressed. They reviewed the treaty documents one more time. They behaved exactly like diplomats getting ready for a historic signing, but hidden beneath their formal clothes were weapons and armor. Concealed in their ceremonial briefcases were devices that would turn the aliens' own station against them, and most importantly, they knew exactly what was coming. The night before the ceremony, Sarah stood at her viewport, looking down at the planet below. Tomorrow, the consortium would learn something about humanity that all of Earth's enemies eventually discovered. Humans were very, very good at surviving, and when survival meant fighting back, there was no species in the galaxy that fought harder or more cleverly than the children of Earth. The trap was set, but not the one the aliens thought. The Great Hall had been transformed for the ceremony. Banners from all 13 species hung from the ceiling. The signing table sat at the center of the room, made from crystal that came from the Harmony homeworld. Cameras from across the galaxy were recording everything. This would be the most watched diplomatic event in galactic history. Admiral Sarah Chen entered the hall wearing her dress uniform, with its simple blue fabric and silver insignia. She looked small compared to the alien delegates in their elaborate ceremonial garb. The Veltar wore robes of shifting silver. The massive Torg were covered in decorated battle armor. The crystal beings of the Harmony reflected light and patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Today marks a new beginning," Supreme Arbiter Kethvar announced to the assembled crowd. His voice was broadcast across the galaxy. For the first time in galactic history, humanity joins the community of civilized species as true partners in peace. Sarah walked to her designated position at the signing table. Around the room, her team took their places. Dr. Webb sat with the scientific observers. Lieutenant Rodriguez stood with the security detail. Commander Singh was positioned near the exit, as protocol required for the ranking security officer. Everything looked exactly as it should. The humans appeared relaxed and honored to be there. The aliens seemed pleased with their successful diplomacy. The ceremony proceeded according to the carefully planned schedule. At exactly 14:25 hours, Sarah reached for the ceremonial stylus. It was made from rare metal from 12 different worlds, symbolizing unity among the species. Her hand was steady as she lifted it. At 14:30 hours, the trap sprung. Energy barriers slammed down around the human delegation, trapping them in the center of the hall. Hidden panels in the walls slid open, revealing weapon emplacements that had been concealed during the tour. Alien soldiers poured into the room from concealed entrances, their weapons aimed at the humans. Supreme Arbiter Kethvar's musical voice turned cold and sharp. "Humanity, you have walked willingly into your doom." Sarah looked up at him calmly. She did not seem surprised or afraid. "Have we?" Kethvar ignored her question and continued his speech. It had obviously been prepared in advance. "Your species has been judged by the consortium. You are too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to exist alongside civilized beings. Today your leadership dies. Your fleets are being destroyed as I speak. Your colonies are burning. Earth itself will be reduced to ash." He gestured to screens around the room. They showed images of consortium fleets attacking human positions. Earth's orbital stations were under bombardment. The Mars colonies were being invaded. The outer settlements were surrounded by alien warships. "Humanity's aggression ends here," Kethvar declared. "Your species will serve as an example to any others who might threaten the peace of civilized space." Sarah set down the stylus and stood up slowly. "An example? Yes. I think humanity will definitely be an example today." The Supreme Arbiter frowned. Humans should be begging for mercy by now. They should be offering to surrender. Instead, Admiral Chen looked almost amused. "You do not understand," Kethvar said. "Your entire species is being exterminated. There is no escape, no rescue, no hope." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Sarah replied. "You've been planning this for months. The generous treaty offer was bait. This station is a trap designed to eliminate human leadership. Your fleets have been positioned to strike our world simultaneously. It's actually quite clever." Her calm manner was making the aliens nervous. The Torg war leader stepped forward, his massive form towering over the humans. "Then you know you are defeated. Surrender, and we will make your deaths quick." Sarah looked around the room at her trapped team. Dr. Webb was still taking notes in his journal. Lieutenant Rodriguez was checking his watch. Commander Singh was examining her fingernails. None of them seemed frightened. "I have a question," Sarah said to Kethvar. "Did your intelligence services ever study human behavior patterns?" "Of course. We know you are an aggressive, paranoid species. These traits made you easy to manipulate." "Paranoid," Sarah repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, we are definitely paranoid. Do you know what paranoid people do when someone offers them something that seems too good to be true?" Kethvar's silver skin was beginning to darken, the Veltar sign of confusion or worry. They suspect deception." "Exactly. And do you know what paranoid people do when they suspect deception?" The Supreme Arbiter didn't answer. Around the room, other alien delegates were beginning to look uncomfortable. The humans' behavior was completely wrong. They should be terrified. Sarah smiled. "Paranoid people prepare for the worst possible scenario." She tapped her communication badge 3 times. It was the same quantum transmitter she had been using to send reports to Earth. But this time the signal was different. The humans in the energy cage began to flicker and fade. Like television images losing signal, they became transparent, then disappeared completely. "Holograms," Sarah's voice said from the empty cage. but the voice was coming from speakers throughout the station. Did you really think we would send our actual leaders to a meeting that was obviously a trap? Kethvar stared at the empty energy barrier. Impossible. Our sensors confirmed human life signs. Your sensors detected exactly what we wanted them to detect, Sarah's voice replied. The real human delegation has been safely aboard our ships for the past 3 days. We've been watching your preparations through hidden cameras and feeding you false readings through the projectors. Panic began spreading among the alien delegates. If the humans weren't trapped, then where were they? The answer came from throughout the station. Hidden panels opened in walls, floors, and ceilings. But instead of more alien soldiers, human commandos emerged. They had been moving through the station's maintenance tunnels for hours, taking positions at every critical system. While you were watching our holograms, Sarah's voice continued, our real teams were taking control of your station. Your weapon, systems, your shields, your communications, all under human control now. The screens showing consortium victories over human forces flickered and changed. The images had been fake too. Instead, the screens now showed the real situation in human. Space Earth's orbital defenses were not destroyed. They were fully active and firing at consortium ships. The Mars colonies were not being invaded. They were launching fighter squadrons that had been hidden underground for months. The outer settlements were not surrounded by alien fleets. They were revealing defensive platforms that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations. You see, Sarah's voice explained, humans are not just paranoid. We are also very good at lying. Every piece of intelligence you gathered about our military capabilities was carefully crafted disinformation. Our real strength has been hidden for decades. The battle footage showed consortium fleets in full retreat from every human system. Ships that the aliens thought were cargo haulers were revealing themselves as heavily armed Q ships. Space stations that appeared to be civilian were transforming into fortress platforms. Even human freighter convoys were dropping their disguises to become military formations. Supreme Arbiter Kethvar tried to activate his personal communicator to call for help. Nothing happened. His commands to the station computer were ignored. Even the artificial gravity was under human control. Your trap was well planned, Sarah admitted. But it had one fatal flaw. You assumed that humans would react the way you expected. You never considered that we might be several steps ahead of you. Throughout the station, alien soldiers were surrendering to human forces. The hidden human teams had moved with perfect coordination, using their knowledge of the station's layout to capture every critical location simultaneously. Dr. Webb's voice joined the broadcast. Every behavioral pattern you displayed, every communication method you used, every psychological profile of your species. We've been studying you as carefully as you thought you were studying us. We knew what you were planning almost before you did. The screens showed more devastating footage. Consortium fleets throughout the galaxy were being ambushed by human forces that had somehow appeared out of nowhere. Ships that had been tracking human movements for months were being attacked from directions they hadn't expected. The lesson here, Sarah's voice said, is that if you are going to set a trap for humanity, you had better make sure it is a perfect trap. Because if you fail, if we survive, if we get the chance to turn the tables, we will not show you the mercy you intended to show us. Commander Singh's voice came through the speakers. Actually, that is not quite true. We are not like you. We will show mercy. Kethvar looked up hopefully. Perhaps humanity could be negotiated with after all. Here are our terms, Sarah continued. The consortium will immediately order all remaining fleets to surrender. You will provide complete intelligence on your military capabilities and government structures. You will return to your homeworlds and await further instructions from Earth. And, if we refuse? The Supreme Arbiter asked, though his voice was barely a whisper. Then we continue demonstrating why it was a bad idea to try to exterminate us, Singh replied cheerfully. The screens showed human fleets that had somehow materialized near every major consortium world, weapons platforms that had been hiding. The human commandos moved through the station like they had built it themselves. In a way, they had. The past 6 days of reconnaissance had given them complete knowledge of every corridor, every system, every weakness in the alien structure. Commander, Singh led Alpha Team toward the central computer core. Her team moved in perfect silence using hand signals and equipment that made no sound. Behind their face masks, they looked calm and professional. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were humanity's best special forces operators, trained for exactly this kind of mission. Core security in 30 seconds, Singh whispered into her throat microphone. Her voice was transmitted instantly to every human team throughout the station. In the reactor control room, Lieutenant Rodriguez was working with a small device that looked like a medical scanner. But instead of checking for illness, it was rewriting the station's computer code. Every security protocol, every safety system, every automated defense was being turned against its creators. Reactor control secured, he reported. Beginning upload of virus package Alpha. Dr. Webb had been right about alien behavioral patterns, but he had also been working on something else during the negotiations. While appearing to take simple notes about alien psychology, he had actually been designing the most sophisticated computer virus in human history. The virus was not just a program, it was a psychological weapon designed specifically for each alien species. It used their own instincts and mental patterns against them. When Veltar computer operators saw the virus, their brains interpreted it as something beautiful and harmless. Torg systems read it as routine maintenance code. The crystal beings of the Harmony thought it was a song. Package Alpha is spreading through their networks, Rodriguez reported. Estimated time to complete system penetration, 4 minutes. Throughout the station, alien technicians stared at their screens in confusion. Their computers were behaving strangely, but the error messages were formatted in ways that each species found reassuring rather than alarming. The virus was spreading, invisibly through every connected system in the consortium network. Meanwhile, Admiral Sarah Chen was no longer just a voice on the communication system. The real Sarah Chen stepped out of a maintenance hatch directly behind Supreme Arbiter Kethvar. "Hello, Supreme Arbiter," she said politely. "I thought we should meet in person." Kethvar spun around, his silver skin flashing through several colors as his emotions shifted from shock to fear to rage. "How did you get aboard the station?" "The same way my teams got here. We came with the delegation, just not the way you expected." Sarah was wearing simple combat armor instead of her dress uniform. Her sidearm was drawn but not aimed at anyone. "Did you really think we would travel to an obvious trap without backup?" The truth was even more elaborate than the aliens had imagined. The human delegation that had arrived 6 days ago had actually been 3 separate groups. The diplomatic team, which had been holograms from the beginning. The reconnaissance team, which had been gathering intelligence while pretending to be simple staff members, and the assault team, which had been hiding in specially modified sections of the human transport ship. "While your people were watching our fake diplomats," Sarah continued, "our real teams were mapping every inch of this station. We know where your weapons are hidden, where your soldiers are stationed, and most importantly, where all your computer systems connect to the galactic network." Dr. Webb emerged from another maintenance access, his scholarly appearance unchanged except for the military-grade tablet he was carrying. "The virus has reached 17 consortium worlds," he reported. "Their fleet coordination systems are beginning to fail." On screens throughout the station, the evidence was undeniable. Consortium ships were losing formation as their navigation computers malfunctioned. Some were turning their weapons on each other as the virus convinced their targeting systems that friendly ships were enemies. Others were simply shutting down as their crews became unable to understand their own controls. "What have you done?" Kethvar demanded. "We have introduced chaos into a system that depends on order," Webb replied calmly. "Your consortium works because all your species communicate through predictable patterns. Our virus disrupts those patterns, making it impossible for you to coordinate large-scale military action." The virus was spreading faster than any biological plague. Every time a consortium ship tried to communicate with another ship, it passed on the infection. Every time a planetary government sent a message to their fleet, the virus gained access to new systems. But humanity's masterpiece was not just technological, it was psychological. The virus was designed to make each species doubt the others. Veltar ships received false reports of Torg betrayal. Crick's forces got fabricated evidence of Harmony treachery. The crystal beings heard distorted songs that convinced them their allies were planning their destruction. Your alliance is dissolving, Sarah observed as the screens showed consortium fleets turning on each other across the galaxy. 12 species held together by shared dominance over the rest of the galaxy. Take away that dominance, add a little suspicion, and the whole structure collapses. Supreme Arbiter Kethvar tried once more to access his command systems. The screens responded, but instead of showing him fleet positions and battle reports, they displayed something else. Complete recordings of every meeting the consortium leadership had held while planning the human genocide. We have been recording everything, Dr. Webb explained. Every plan, every order, every discussion about exterminating humanity. These recordings are being broadcast on all frequencies throughout the galaxy. Every species will know exactly what the consortium intended to do. This was perhaps the most devastating blow of all. The consortium had ruled through diplomacy and the threat of overwhelming force, but their authority depended on other species believing they were reasonable and just. The recording showed them planning mass murder in cold, calculating detail. Public opinion is turning against you, Sarah continued. Species that have been your allies for centuries are breaking their treaties. Your puppet governments are facing revolutions. Your trade partners are closing their borders to consortium ships. The screens showed the evidence. Riots on consortium, worlds, alien governments declaring independence, entire sectors of space rejecting consortium authority. The virus had not just disrupted their military coordination, it had destroyed their political legitimacy. But humanity was not finished. On the screens, new footage began playing. It showed human colonies that the consortium thought had been destroyed. But instead of burning cities and dead civilians, the videos showed something impossible. The colonies were not just intact, they were thriving. Earth's orbital defenses were not damaged. They were stronger than they had ever been. The human military was not scattered and defeated. It was larger and more advanced than any intelligence report had suggested. Every piece of information your spies gathered about human military capabilities was false, Sarah explained. We have been feeding you lies for decades. Our real strength was hidden in deep space, in asteroid fields, in systems you never bothered to explore. The footage showed the truth. Massive shipyards hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids, battle stations disguised as mining platforms, entire fleets that had been constructed in secret and kept dark for years, waiting for the day they would be needed. We learned paranoia from Earth's history, Dr. Webb added. Every civilization that survived did so by preparing for invasion, by assuming the worst, by never trusting that peace would last. We have been preparing for this war since the day we first met the consortium. Supreme Arbiter Kethvar sank into one of the ceremonial chairs, his silver skin now completely dark with despair. You have destroyed us. No, Sarah corrected. You destroyed yourselves. We simply gave you the opportunity to do it. The virus had reached its final phase. Across the galaxy, consortium governments were receiving the same message on every screen, in every language, through every communication system. The Galactic Consortium attempted to commit genocide against humanity. This attempt has failed. Effective immediately, all consortium military forces will stand down. All consortium officials will report to the nearest human representative for processing. Any resistance will be met with the full force of Earth's military. The galaxy has seen what happens when someone tries to exterminate humanity, Sarah said. We do not conquer, we do not occupy, we do not impose our government on others, but we will not allow anyone to threaten our existence. She gestured to the screens, which now showed human fleets throughout consortium space. Not attacking, not destroying, but simply present. A demonstration of power that made further resistance pointless. Your choice is simple, Sarah concluded. Accept the new reality, or discover what humanity is capable of when we stop holding back. The consortium that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years had been dismantled in less than 4 hours. But humanity's real test was still to come. what they would do with victory. The battle was over in 3 hours and 17 minutes. Across the galaxy, consortium fleets surrendered as their coordination systems failed and their governments collapsed. But in the Great Hall of the diplomatic station, Admiral Sarah Chen did something that surprised everyone, including her own people. She offered Supreme Arbiter Kethvar her hand. "Get up," she said simply. Kethvar stared at the human hand extended toward him. His silver skin was still dark with defeat and confusion. Around him, his fellow consortium leaders sat in stunned silence, waiting to learn their fate. "I do not understand," Kethvar said. "That's the problem," Sarah replied, her hand still extended. "You never understood humanity at all. You saw aggression and assumed we were mindless killers. You saw paranoia and assumed we were cowards. You saw our independence and assumed we were chaos." Slowly, hesitantly, Kethvar took her hand and allowed her to help him stand. "But you missed the most important thing about humans," Sarah continued. "We are capable of change. We learn from our mistakes, and we can choose mercy even when we have the power to destroy." Dr. Webb stepped forward, his scholarly manner unchanged even in the aftermath of their victory. "Admiral, Earth Command is requesting confirmation of the consortium leadership's surrender. They're asking what terms we want to impose." Sarah looked around the room at the defeated alien delegates. 12 species that had ruled the galaxy through fear and overwhelming force. They had planned to commit genocide, to erase humanity from existence. By all the rules of galactic politics, they deserved no mercy. "Tell Earth Command that we're offering the consortium a choice," Sarah said. "They can face justice for war, crimes, or they can help us build something better." The alien delegates looked at each other in confusion. Mercy was not something they had expected from the species they had tried to exterminate. "What do you mean?" asked the Torg war leader, his massive form still intimidating despite his defeat. "I mean," Sarah said, "that humanity is not interested in ruling the galaxy. We never were. We just wanted to be left alone to grow and explore in peace." She activated the room's communication system, but instead of connecting to Earth, she opened a channel to every inhabited world in known space. "Citizens of the galaxy," her voice broadcast to billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. "Today, the Galactic Consortium attempted to commit genocide against humanity. This attempt has failed." The screens throughout the room showed alien faces across the galaxy, some afraid, some hopeful, some confused. For most species, this was their first indication that the war had even happened. The consortium justified their actions by claiming that humanity was too violent and dangerous to exist alongside civilized species. Sarah continued. "They used this fear to maintain their control over all of you. But I want you to see what humanity chooses to do with victory." She gestured to the defeated consortium leaders. "These beings ordered the extermination of every human man, woman, and child in the galaxy. Under the laws of war, they could be executed. Under the justice of revenge, they should be destroyed. But humanity chooses a different path." "Supreme." Arbiter Kethvar looked up at her in amazement. "You are offering us amnesty?" "I am offering you redemption," Sarah corrected. "The consortium system is finished. Your rule through fear and domination is over. But the galaxy still needs leadership, and despite your crimes, many of you have skills and knowledge that could help build a better future." Dr. Webb activated his tablet, displaying a document that had been prepared during the long journey to the peace conference. "The Terran Accords," he announced, "a new framework for galactic governance based on cooperation rather than domination." The document that appeared on screens throughout the galaxy was nothing like the old consortium charter. Instead of a hierarchy, with one species ruling over others, it proposed a federation where each world would have equal representation. Instead of military might determining policy, decisions would be made through democratic processes. "Any species can join the federation," Sarah explained. "Any world can leave if they choose. No one will be forced to obey laws they had no voice in creating. And most importantly, no species will ever again have the power to threaten another with extinction." The alien delegates read the document in shocked silence. It was everything the consortium had never been: fair, democratic, protective of individual rights. Why? Kethvar asked. Why offer this to those who tried to destroy you? Sarah smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, she looked genuinely happy. Because that's what humans do. We fight when we're threatened, but we build when we're safe. We've spent our entire history learning from conflict and choosing cooperation. The communication channel was still open to the entire galaxy. Sarah's words were being heard by every species on every world. The Terran Federation will protect any species that chooses to join, she continued. We will share our technology freely. We will help worlds that need assistance. And we will guarantee that no species will ever again face the threat of genocide. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward with another device. This one designed to broadcast on frequencies that could reach every ship in space. All consortium military forces, this is Admiral Chen of the Terran Federation. You have a choice. Continue following orders from a government that no longer exists, or help us build a better galaxy. The response was immediate. On screens throughout the hall, they could see consortium ships across the galaxy, lowering their weapons and signaling their intent to surrender. But more than that, many were requesting permission to join the new Federation. The Crick's Fourth. Fleet requests permission to assist with humanitarian aid to displaced populations, one report showed. The Veltar Science Division offers to share medical technology to help repair war damage, read another. The Harmony Collective wishes to contribute to the new galactic communication network. Species after species, world after world, the old consortium was transforming itself into something new. Not because they were conquered, but because they were offered a chance to be part of something better. Dr. Webb looked up from his tablet with amazement. Admiral, we're receiving applications to join the Federation from over 300 worlds, including several species that were never part of the consortium. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Fear kept the old system together, but hope is much stronger than fear. Supreme Arbiter Kethvar stood and looked around the room. His silver skin was beginning to brighten again, not with the anticipation of violence, but with something he had never felt before. Genuine hope for the future. The Veltar hegemony formally requests membership in the Terran Federation, he announced. And I personally request permission to serve in whatever capacity might help repair the damage I have caused. One by one, the other consortium leaders stood and made similar declarations. The Torg war leader offered his military expertise for peacekeeping operations. The Crick's delegate requested assignment to humanitarian missions. Even the crystal beings of the Harmony pledged their unique abilities to the new government. Sarah looked out the viewport at the planet below. Kepler 442b, which had been chosen as neutral ground for a trap, was now becoming the birthplace of a new galactic civilization. There's one more thing, she said, activating the communication system again. The Federation will be headquartered here, on this world. But we won't be governing from a military station floating in space. We'll be building a real city on the planet's surface, where beings from every species can live and work together. The final image broadcast to the galaxy showed the construction plans for the new Federation capital. Not a fortress or a military base, but a genuine city with parks, schools, hospitals, and homes. A place where the children of former enemies could grow up as friends. As the broadcast ended, Sarah looked around the great hall one more time. The banners of the consortium still hung from the ceiling, but they would soon be replaced with the symbols of the new Federation. The ceremonial table where she was supposed to sign humanity's death warrant would become the place where dozens of species signed a treaty of genuine peace. Dr. Webb approached her with a final report. Admiral, Earth Command reports that our hidden fleets are standing down. The deception networks are being shut down. We're beginning the transition from a military operation to a civilian government. Sarah smiled. Tell them that humanity's greatest victory wasn't defeating the consortium. It was choosing what to do after we won. 6 months later, the city of New Harmony was taking shape on the surface of the world that had once been chosen. for humanity's execution. Humans worked alongside Veltar, Torg, and dozens of other species to build a capital that belonged to everyone. Admiral Sarah Chen, now Secretary General of the Terran Federation, stood on the balcony of the government building and watched alien children playing in the park below. Some were human children, some were young Veltar, and some were species that had never even been part of the old consortium. They were all laughing. Dr. Webb joined her on the balcony, carrying a report on the Federation's first year of operation. "The integration is proceeding better than we hoped," he said. "Turns out that most species prefer cooperation to conflict when given the choice." "Most species are like humans," Sarah replied. "They want to be safe, too." Captain William Hayes stood at the viewport of the spaceship USS Determination. His old eyes looked out at the stars. At 68 years old, his body showed the marks of many wars fought across Earth and her colonies. His gray hair was cut, short in the military style he had kept for 50 years. The message from the Galactic Council had surprised him. Humans had asked to join the group of alien species for many years. They were always told no for one reason or another. The aliens thought humans were too violent, too unpredictable, or too young as a space-traveling species. But now everything had changed. A new enemy called the Kreslak Horde threatened the Council worlds. These insect-like aliens used strange, biological machines as weapons. They had destroyed many of the Council's advanced warships. The Council military leaders were young and had never fought in real wars. Their computer battle plans failed against an enemy that didn't follow the rules. "Captain Hayes, the Council is waiting for you," said Lieutenant Susan Miller. She had worked with Hayes for 15 years. Her own hair was gray at the temples and small wrinkles showed at the corners of her eyes. "Do you think they'll listen to us this time, Susan?" Hayes asked. He adjusted his formal blue uniform, which still fit his tall frame perfectly. The medals on his chest caught the light from the stars. "They're scared, sir," she replied. "And scared people will try things they normally wouldn't." Hayes nodded. He knew fear made people do strange things. He had seen it in every war he had fought. The hallway to the council chamber was long and curved. The walls were made of a shining white material that was not quite metal and not quite stone. Hayes walked with his small group of human veterans. All of them were over 60 years old. Some used canes or had visible mechanical parts where limbs had been replaced after war injuries. The large doors to the council chamber opened without a sound. The room was huge, with seats rising up in a circle. Each seat held a different type of alien. Some had multiple arms or eyes. Others had skin that changed colors or bodies made mostly of gas held in special suits. High Chancellor Xylos sat in the center seat. The alien was tall and thin with skin that shimmered like an oil slick in water. Xylos looked down at the humans with large purple eyes that blinked sideways. "Humans," Xylos said, the translator making the aliens' clicks and whistles into English. "We have studied your military history. We find your tendency toward violence disturbing, but we admit that this experience might be useful in our current problem." Hayes felt the other council members watching him. Some looked hopeful. Others seemed disgusted that humans were even allowed in their chamber. "With respect, Chancellor," Hayes said, stepping forward, "we don't just offer experience. We offer victory." A murmur went through the council. Some members buzzed or clicked in their own languages. "Bold words," said another council member, a round alien with green skin covered in what looked like tiny feathers. "The Kreslak have destroyed our best ships. Our most advanced weapons don't work against them. What can humans possibly do that we cannot?" Hayes smiled slightly. "Fight dirty." The council chamber grew silent. "Explain," Xylos demanded. "Your military forces are trained to fight according to protocols and simulations," Hayes said. "But real war isn't clean or predictable. The Kreslak use some kind of energy field that makes your fancy weapons useless. But humans have been fighting each other with simple weapons for thousands of years." Hayes pulled up a holographic display from a device on his wrist. It showed images of human tanks, artillery, and soldiers carrying rifles. "These are ancient by your standards," he continued. "But they fire physical bullets and shells. They don't Need computers or energy fields, they just work. And who would operate these machines? Asked a blue crystalline alien. Your species is not numerous enough to provide the forces needed. Lieutenant Miller stepped forward. We have millions of veterans with combat experience, people who fought in the Mars Rebellion, the Titan conflict, the asteroid belt wars. Most are retired now, but they know how to fight. Old soldiers, the feathered alien said with something like disgust. You want to send your elderly to fight our war? Old soldiers are the most dangerous kind, Hayes replied calmly. Young soldiers think they're immortal. They make mistakes. Old soldiers know better. We've seen friends die. We've seen what war really costs. And we do what needs to be done anyway. Xylo studied Hayes for a long moment. You yourself would fight? I would lead the first wave personally, Hayes said without hesitation. The council members spoke among themselves in hushed tones. After several minutes, Xylos raised a long, thin hand for silence. The Kreslak fleet will reach the mining colony on Nexus 4 in 3 days, the Chancellor said. If they take the planet, they gain access to resources that will make them even stronger. We have evacuated many civilians, but our military forces have been unable to stop the Kreslak advance. Give us permission to deploy, and we'll show you what humans can do, Hayes said. Very well, Xylos decided. But understand this. If you fail, the Council will never again consider Earth for membership, and the Kreslak will likely target your world next. We understand the stakes, Hayes replied. When the humans left the council chamber, Miller walked beside Hayes. That went better than expected, she said quietly. They're desperate, Hayes replied. Now we need to prove we can back up our words. Back. On the USS Determination, Hayes called a meeting with the other veterans who had made the journey. They gathered in the ship's conference room. Colonel Barbara Winters, 70 years old with silver hair and a burn scar along her neck, looked at the holographic map of Nexus 4. Reminds me of the terrain in the Olympus Mons campaign, she said. Similar. Gravity, too, said Major Paul Garcia. His right arm was a military-grade prosthetic from an injury 30 years ago. About 80% of Earth normal. We'll need to bring up the old equipment, Hayes said. The M1A5 tanks, the artillery, the projectile weapons. Everything we mothballed after the Treaty of Ceres. The Council is sending us their battle data, Miller reported, looking at her tablet. The Kreslak use some kind of quantum field that disrupts energy weapons and advanced targeting systems, but it has no effect on simple mechanical devices. Like a good old-fashioned rifle, Garcia said with a smile. Exactly, Hayes agreed. I want all our people ready to deploy in 48 hours. Council ships will transport us to Nexus 4. We'll coordinate with whatever Council forces remain there. What about medical support? Asked Dr. Ellen Rivera, a combat surgeon in her 60s. These old bodies don't recover like they used to. We're bringing the best field medics we have, Hayes assured her. And we're not planning to die out there. Just to win. As the others left to prepare, Miller stayed behind with Hayes. He stood again at the viewport, looking out at the alien space station that orbited a blue-green world, nothing like Earth. Think we can really do this, sir? Miller asked. Most of us haven't seen combat in years. Hayes turned to her, his face serious but confident. You don't forget how to fight, Susan. You just gain more reasons to make sure you win. As the USS Determination prepared for war, news spread through the human colonies. Retired soldiers everywhere began to dust off their uniforms and report for duty. The old warships that had been converted to cargo vessels were brought back to military service. The Galactic Council watched in confusion as humans embraced a war that wasn't truly theirs. What they didn't understand was that humans had always known they weren't alone in the universe, and they had always prepared for the day when they would need to prove their worth among the stars. Captain William Hayes had waited his whole life for this moment. One last battle. One chance to show the galaxy what human soldiers, even old ones, could do. The human military ship Remembrance became very busy as shuttles brought equipment and people from Earth. Colonel Diane Kelly watched as old tanks and big guns were loaded into the cargo areas. She was 71 years old with artificial knees and a spine fixed with metal. Her gray hair was cut short and her eyes missed nothing. "The Council aliens are complaining about our equipment, ma'am," said Sergeant Frank Rogers. He was a big man whose beard was now completely white. Kelly laughed and touched the long gun barrel of an M1A5 tank. The design was over 100 years old, but this tank had been updated many times. "Let them complain," she said. "The Kreslak use some kind of special field that makes energy weapons and fancy drives useless. But good old bullets and shells, those still work just fine." Around the ship, retired soldiers checked equipment and practiced. Many were in their 60s and 70s. They moved more slowly than young soldiers, but they knew exactly what they were doing. Every movement was careful and precise, born from decades of practice. In the command center, Admiral Joseph Martinez looked at maps with the Council's military helper, a young alien named Zirith. The alien had 4 eyes and blue skin. "You plan to use these old weapons?" Zirith asked, not hiding his doubt. Martinez smiled. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Your fancy drones and energy guns got shut down by their tech. Our tanks, our artillery, our rifles, they'll keep firing until the last bullet is gone." Zirith blinked all 4 eyes in confusion. "But your soldiers, they are all near the end of their lives." "We're old," Martinez corrected, "not useless." In another part of the ship, Major Alan Peters worked with his team to prepare their combat suits. The suits were not as advanced as the Council military's armor, but they had one big advantage. They worked without complex computers that the Kreslak could disable. "Check the joint seals twice," Peters told his team. "We don't know what kind of air is on Nexus or 4. "Already done, sir," said Captain Lisa Wright, his second in command. She was 63 with streaks of gray in her dark hair. "And I added extra padding where your back always bothers you." Peters smiled at her. They had served together for 30 years across 3 different wars. "Always looking out for me." "Someone has to," she replied. "You'd fight in your underwear if that was all we had." In the medical bay, Dr. Ellen Rivera prepared her supplies. She had been a combat surgeon in the Mars Rebellion 40 years ago. Now her hands shook slightly, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "We're bringing twice the usual blood and painkillers," she told her medical team. "Old bodies don't bounce back like young ones." "The Council offered their medical tech," said a younger doctor. "They have these healing pods that can fix almost anything." Rivera shook her head. "Their tech needs power. What happens when the Kreslak shut it down? No, we do this the old-fashioned way. Bandages, stitches, splints, things that don't need computers to work." On the bridge, Captain Hayes received reports from all departments. Lieutenant Miller stood beside him with a tablet. "All combat teams. Report ready," she said. "Supply loading is at 87%. Medical is prepared for casualties." Hayes nodded. "And the Council forces?" "They're sending 12 ships with us. About 2,000 of their soldiers remain on Nexus 4, mostly in defensive positions around the main mining facility." "Not enough," Hayes said quietly. "We knew that going in," Miller reminded him. Hayes looked at a picture of Nexus 4 on the main screen. It was mostly desert with some mountains and a few large lakes. The mining facility was in a valley surrounded by rocky hills. "Have Colonel Kelly focus our landing here." Hayes pointed to an area about 10 miles from the main facility. "The ridge line will give us cover to set up our artillery. The Council commander wants us to land directly at the facility," Miller said. "And put all our forces in one easy target?" "No thanks," Hayes replied. "We do this our way or not at all." That evening, Hayes called a meeting with all the senior officers. They gathered in the ship's mess hall, which was the only room big enough for everyone. "We reach Nexus 4 tomorrow," Hayes told them. "The Kreslak forces have already landed on the South Continent and are moving toward the main mining facility. Council forces are holding them back, but they're losing ground." He showed a map of the planet and their planned landing zone. "Our strategy is simple. We land here, establish a base, and hit the Kreslak from the side while the Council forces engage them from the front. Colonel Kelly's tank division will lead the assault. Major Peters and his infantry will provide support." "What about air cover?" asked Colonel Barbara Winters. "We're bringing 20 F-52 fighters," Hayes said. "They're old, but they've been modified to work in Nexus IF's atmosphere. The pilots are all veterans of the asteroid belt wars. And the Kreslak ships? Admiral Martinez asked. They're holding position on the far side of the planet, Hayes replied. They seem to prefer ground assaults for initial invasions. That gives us a chance to establish our position before they realize what we're doing. After the meeting, many of the officers stayed to talk. Some hadn't seen each other in years. They shared stories of old battles and remembered friends who were gone. From across the room, Hayes watched them. These were not perfect soldiers with perfect bodies. They had bad knees and artificial hips. Some had scars, missing limbs, or eyes replaced with basic implants. But they had something the Council forces lacked. They knew what real war felt like. Later that night, Hayes couldn't sleep. He went to the observation deck where he could see the Council ships flying alongside the Remembrance. Their ships were beautiful, with sleek designs that looked like they had been grown rather than built. He heard footsteps and turned to see Dr. Rivera approaching. "Shouldn't you be resting, Doctor?" he asked. "I could ask you the same thing, Captain," she replied. "Old soldiers need their sleep too." "Too much on my mind." Rivera stood beside him, looking at the stars. "We're really doing this, aren't we? One last fight. Does it seem crazy to you?" Hayes asked. "All of us at our age?" "Completely crazy," she smiled. "But I wouldn't miss it. The Council needs to learn that fancy weapons aren't what win wars. It's the people willing to stand their ground no matter what." Hayes nodded. "Get some rest, Ellen. Tomorrow will be a long day." "You too, William," she said before leaving. Hayes stayed a while longer, thinking about all the battles he had fought. He had hoped to end his life peacefully, maybe on a porch, somewhere watching the sunset. But fate had other plans. Tomorrow, old human soldiers would step onto an alien battlefield. They would show the Galactic Council what humans could do. Win or lose, it would be a fight the galaxy would remember. As he finally turned to go back to his quarters, Hayes allowed himself a small smile. He was ready. They all were. The Kreslak had no idea what was coming for them. The command shuttle touched down on Nexus 4, sending up clouds of red dust. Major Alan Peters watched through the small window as the landscape came into view. The planet had a sky that was more orange than blue, and 3 small moons could be seen even in daylight. "Reminds me of Arizona," Peters said as the shuttle door opened with a hiss. The hot air rushed in, carrying the smell of metal and something like cinnamon. Peters stepped onto the alien soil, his combat boots leaving deep prints in the dust. At 64, his eyes weren't as good as they once were, though the special glasses he wore helped him see clearly. "Why is it always a desert?" he muttered, looking around at the barren landscape. Captain Lisa Wright stepped out behind him, her rifle ready. "Because sand gets everywhere and makes us miserable," she said with a small smile. The landing zone was filled with frightened Council civilians and their military personnel. Most of the civilians had blue or green skin and extra limbs. They stared at the humans with wide eyes. A Council military commander approached Peters. He was young by human standards, with a tall head crest that moved as he spoke. "You are the human reinforcements?" the alien asked, his translator making his speech sound slightly flat. Peters stood straight, ignoring the familiar pain in his back. "3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, retired but called back to duty. We hear you have a bug problem." The Council commander looked past Peters at the human soldiers coming off the shuttles. Men and women in their 60s and 70s moved with slow but steady purpose, setting up equipment and forming defensive lines. "These are elders," the commander said. "We requested warriors." Wright stepped forward, the medals on her chest catching the sunlight. "With respect, we've fought in more wars than your entire species has seen in the last 1,000 years. Age brings experience, and experience keeps you alive." Just then, a distant boom echoed across the desert. The ground shook slightly. The Council soldiers looked scared, but the human veterans just turned toward the sound as if measuring it. "Kreslak artillery," Peters said calmly. "About 15 miles away, based on the sound delay. They're using standard bombardment to weaken defenses." "How do you know this?" the Council commander asked. Been under fire more times than I can count, Peters replied. You learn to tell the difference between weapons by their sound. More human shuttles landed, bringing tanks, artillery, and other equipment. Colonel Diane Kelly directed the unloading, her voice sharp and clear through the dust. Get those tanks behind the ridgeline. Artillery units set up on the high ground. I want a defensive perimeter in 30 minutes. The human soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. Despite their age, they knew exactly what to do. Young council soldiers watched in confusion as the humans dug trenches and foxholes instead of setting up energy shields. A council officer approached Kelly. Your soldiers dig in the dirt? We have portable force field generators. Kelly smiled slightly. Force fields can be disrupted. A good hole in the ground never fails. By midday, the human base was taking shape. Peters and Wright walked the perimeter, checking positions and talking with the soldiers. Position secure, sir, said Sergeant Greg Wilson, a man with a mechanical leg and a thick gray mustache. We've got clear lines of fire in all directions. Good work, Peters said. Any sign of Kreslak scouts? Nothing yet. They're still focused on the mining facility to the east. In the command tent, Captain Hayes studied the maps with Admiral Martinez and the council commanders. The council aliens used holographic displays that showed the movement of Kreslak forces in real time. They're advancing in 3 columns toward the mining facility, a council officer explained. Our forces are holding the main entrance, but we cannot stop their advance forever. Hayes nodded, his eyes narrowed in thought. They don't know we're here yet, that gives us an advantage. He pointed to a spot on the map. We need to hit them from this ridgeline, draw their attention away from the facility. That would place your forces directly in their path, the council commander objected. Exactly, Martinez said. That's the point. The council aliens looked at each other in confusion. Their military training told them to avoid direct confrontation when outnumbered. You would sacrifice your soldiers? Asked one alien with 4 arms. We're not planning to be sacrificed, Hayes replied firmly. We're planning to fight. There's a difference. As evening approached, Peters stood on a small hill overlooking the human camp. The sun was setting, turning the sky deep red. In the distance, the lights of the mining facility could be seen, along with occasional flashes from weapons fire. Wright joined him, bringing 2 cups of coffee. Command says the Kreslak will reach our position by morning, she said, handing him a cup. Peters took a sip of the hot coffee. Good, I hate waiting. The council soldiers think we're crazy, Wright said. They keep asking why we would volunteer for this mission at our age. What did you tell them? That old soldiers are the best kind. We know what matters. Peters nodded. Below them, human soldiers were gathering in small groups around portable heaters. Some played cards, others cleaned their weapons. A few simply sat quietly, lost in their own thoughts. Remember the night before the Olympus Mons drop? Peters asked suddenly. Wright smiled. How could I forget? You gave that speech about Mars belonging to all humans, not just the corporations. I was young and full of big ideas then. And now, Peters looked at the alien sky with its 3 small moons. Now I just want to make sure these council species understand that humanity has earned its place out here among the stars. In the medical tent, Dr. Ellen Rivera finished organizing her supplies. Field beds were set up in neat rows, ready for the wounded they all knew would come. Her young assistant, a council doctor with purple skin, watched with interest. Your medical technology is so simple, the alien said. Simple but reliable, Rivera replied. I've performed surgery during artillery bombardments with nothing but basic tools and steady hands. Our doctors never go near the battlefield, the alien admitted. Different approach, Rivera said kindly. Not necessarily better or worse, just different. Night fell fully, bringing with it a chill that made the desert seem even more alien. In the command tent, Hayes received the latest reports from Earth. More veterans are volunteering, Lieutenant Miller told him. Ships are being loaded as we speak. They could be here in 3 days if we need reinforcements. Hayes nodded, touched by the response. Let's hope we're still here in 3 days. Outside, the human soldiers prepared for battle in their own ways. Some slept, knowing they needed rest. Others wrote letters to loved ones. Many just sat together, sharing stories of past wars and fallen friends. In his tent, Peters looked at an old photo of his family, his wife, children, and grandchildren, back on Earth. He tucked it carefully into his chest pocket, close to his heart. One more battle, he whispered to himself. Just one more. As dawn approached, the first scouts reported Kreslak movements near their position. The insect-like aliens were moving faster than expected, their strange biological machines making odd clicking sounds in the pre-dawn darkness. The old human soldiers took their positions, weapons ready. They had fought on Earth, on Mars, in the asteroid belt, and on distant moons. Now they would fight on yet another world, showing the galaxy what human veterans could do. The battle for Nexus 4 was about to begin. The first light of dawn revealed the Kreslak forces moving across the dusty plain. General Patricia Clark watched through binoculars as the enemy advanced. At 73, she was the oldest field commander in the human forces. Her white hair was cut short, and a long scar ran down the side of her face from a battle long ago. "They're coming in a standard phalanx formation," reported Colonel Gary Edwards, her tactical officer. His hands, spotted with age, held a tablet showing the enemy movements. No changes despite the rough ground. They're used to winning with numbers, not smart tactics. Clark nodded. They've never needed to adapt. Today, they'll learn. Around them, human veterans had turned the ridge into a fortress during the night. Foxholes and trenches zigzagged across the landscape. Artillery pieces were hidden behind rocks and in small caves. Snipers lay in position, their rifles steady despite their aging hands. In the command bunker, council representatives watched, with confusion. The aliens had shimmering skin and 4 eyes that blinked sideways. "Your soldiers hide in the ground?" asked Talia, a female alien tactical advisor. "Our forces use gravity shields and force bubbles for protection." "Which the Kreslak can shut down," Edwards replied. "A good hole in the ground always works." Clark studied the approaching enemy. The Kreslak looked like a mix between insects and machines. They had 6 legs and hard outer shells. Some carried weapons that glowed with strange energy. Others had weapons built into their bodies. "Range to target?" Clark asked. 5 miles in closing, a soldier reported. Clark nodded and spoke into her radio. "All artillery units, prepare to fire. Tanks, hold position behind the ridge. Wait for my command." The human soldiers checked their weapons one last time. In a forward position, Major Peters and Captain Wright crouched in a reinforced bunker with a clear view of the approaching enemy. "Just like old times," Wright said, adjusting her rifle. Peters smiled slightly. "Except my knees hurt more now." The Kreslak forces moved closer, seemingly unaware of the trap they were walking into. Their insect-like bodies created a strange, clicking sound as they moved across the rocky ground. In her command position, Clark watched them enter the kill zone. She picked up her radio. "All artillery units, fire!" The first volley of human artillery fire erupted from hidden positions along the ridge. The shells arced high into the orange sky before raining down on the Kreslak formation. Explosions tore through their ranks, sending bodies and machine parts flying. The council representatives gasped as they watched on their screens. "Simple kinetic weapons," Clark explained calmly. "Sometimes the oldest solutions work best." The Kreslak forces quickly regrouped and charged toward the human positions. As they got closer, the human tanks emerged from behind the ridge, their main guns firing. Each shot found its target, as the tank crews had spent decades perfecting their aim. Private Henry Jackson sat at a heavy machine gun, his arthritis-curved fingers steady on the trigger. At 65, his eyes weren't as sharp as they once were, but he could still hit what he aimed at. Beside him, Corporal Nancy Rivera fed ammunition belts into the gun. "Just like the Battle of Olympus Mons," Jackson said over the roar of gunfire. Rivera nodded, except those enemies couldn't spit acid. The Kreslak forces split into smaller groups trying to flank the human positions. Some carried strange devices that shot globs of burning liquid. Others used sonic weapons that made the ground shake. "Colonel," Kelly's voice came over the radio. "They're trying to circle around our left flank. Tank Units 3 and 4 repositioned to Sector 7. The human M1A5 tanks, their designs over a century old but still deadly, moved with surprising speed. They cut off the Kreslak attempt to flank the human forces. In the medical tent behind the lines, Dr. Rivera prepared for casualties. The first wounded soldiers arrived, carried by their comrades. She worked quickly, her old hands still skilled, at stopping bleeding and removing shrapnel. "More coming in," shouted a medic. Rivera looked up from the soldier she was treating. "Set up more beds. We're going to need them." Back on the front line, the battle grew more intense. The Kreslak forces pushed forward despite heavy losses. Their strange bodies could take incredible damage before falling. "They keep coming," Wright said, reloading her rifle. "Don't they know when to retreat?" "They've never lost before," Peters replied. "They don't know how." A massive explosion rocked the human left flank as Kreslak forces broke through a section of the line. Clark immediately redirected forces to seal the breach. "Second platoon, move to Sector 5, she ordered. "Artillery, concentrate fire on these coordinates." The human veterans responded quickly, showing the discipline that came from decades of combat experience. Soldiers in their 60s and 70s moved between positions, laying down covering. Fire for each other. Sergeant Frank Rogers led a squad to reinforce the broken line. His white beard was now streaked with dust and blood from a cut on his forehead. "Hold this position," he shouted to his soldiers. "Don't let them through." The fighting continued for hours. Human casualties mounted as the Kreslak pressed their attack. But the veterans held firm, their positions well prepared and their tactics sound. In the command bunker, the council representatives watched in amazement as the human forces stopped what had seemed like an unstoppable enemy. "How are they doing this?" Talia asked, her four eyes wide with surprise. "The Kreslak have superior numbers and technology." Hayes, who had joined Clark in the command center, smiled grimly. "Because we've seen worse. Every human soldier out there has faced death before and kept fighting anyway." As the day wore on, the Kreslak attacks began to lose strength. Their formations became less organized, their tactics more desperate. For the first time, they seemed unsure. "They're adapting," Edwards observed. "Learning that their usual approach isn't working." "Too late for them," Clark replied. "We've got them figured out now." At sunset, the Kreslak forces suddenly pulled back, retreating across the dusty plain. The human soldiers watched carefully, not celebrating yet. "Are they giving up?" a council officer asked hopefully. "No," Hayes said, studying the enemy movements. "They're regrouping, probably calling for reinforcements. This battle isn't over." As darkness fell, the human forces used the lull to reinforce their positions, treat their wounded, and prepare for the next attack. In the medical tent, Dr. Rivera worked tirelessly, saving those she could. Peters and Wright walked the line, checking on their soldiers. Despite their age, the veterans showed remarkable endurance. "We lost 17 today," Wright reported quietly. "Another 43 wounded." Peters nodded solemnly. "Better than I expected against an enemy like this." In the distance, they could see the lights of Kreslak forces gathering. Tomorrow would bring another battle, perhaps even harder than today's. "Get some rest," Peters told his soldiers. "Tomorrow we finish this." As the 3 moons of Nexus 4 rose in the alien sky, the old, human soldiers prepared for another day of war. They had survived the first test. The Kreslak had learned that humans, even old ones, were not easy to defeat. And somewhere in space, the council representatives were sending urgent messages. The humans are holding. The impossible is happening. Old human soldiers have stepped onto the battlefield, and the Kreslak are retreating. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council began 3 days after the Battle of Nexus Ridge. The large round chamber was quiet, as videos of the battle played on the main screen. Normally, the council members would talk during presentations, making small deals and having side conversations. Today they sat in complete silence. The video showed human veterans fighting against overwhelming Kreslak forces. It showed Major Peters, blood running down his face from a head wound, leading a group of soldiers in a counterattack that broke the enemy's advance. It showed Colonel Kelly directing tank movements despite her position being hit by enemy fire. It showed Dr. Rivera performing surgery in a half-collapsed medical tent. When the recording ended, no one spoke for several long moments. High Chancellor Zylos finally broke the silence. "We have asked the human representatives to join us." The doors opened and Admiral Martinez entered with Colonel Kelly. Martinez wore a clean dress uniform, though his right arm was in a sling. Kelly walked with a slight limp, leaning on a cane, her face showing fresh cuts that were still healing. "The Kreslak have completely withdrawn from Nexus 4, Martinez reported, his voice strong despite his injuries. "Their remaining ships have pulled back to the outer part of the system. Our intelligence suggests they are reconsidering their plans to invade Council space." A Regalian Council member with green skin and 3 eyes leaned forward. How did your old warriors defeat an enemy our best military units could not stop?" Kelly stepped forward. "The Kreslak relied too much on their advanced technology. They used energy fields to shut down your fancy weapons and computer systems. But humanity has been fighting wars since we first stood upright. We know that when technology fails, you go back to basics." "And your soldiers," Zylos said, long fingers. Pressed together, they fought with such determination despite their age. Martinez smiled slightly. "Perhaps because of their age. Young soldiers fight because they're trained to, because they think they can't be hurt. Old soldiers fight because they know exactly what's at stake. Because they've seen friends die, because they understand that sometimes winning requires sacrifice." The council chamber filled with voices as the members discussed among themselves. After several minutes, Zylos raised a hand for silence. "Humanity's request to join the Galactic Council has been reconsidered," the Chancellor announced. "It seems we have much to learn from your species." Back on the human ship Remembrance, Captain William Hayes received the message from Martinez. He sat in his chair, feeling every one of his 68 years. The battle had been hard. They had lost 43 soldiers with over 100 wounded, but they had won. Lieutenant Susan Miller brought him a cup of coffee. "News from the council, sir?" Hayes nodded. "We're in. It seems all it took was showing them that wisdom comes with age, and sometimes so does victory." Miller smiled. "What happens now, sir?" Hayes looked out at the stars. "Now we teach them how to maintain peace, because old soldiers know better than anyone the real cost of war." The next day, a ceremony was held on Nexus 4. Council representatives and human soldiers gathered on the battlefield where they had fought together. A simple stone monument was placed to honor those who had died. Major Peters stood with Captain Wright, both in dress uniforms, as the names of the fallen were read. 43 names, Wright said quietly. 43 friends. Peters nodded. They knew what they were signing up for. They died for something that mattered. Across the gathering, Dr. Rivera talked with council medical staff. They were eager to learn her primitive techniques that had saved so many lives when their advanced medical pods had failed. "Sometimes the old ways work best," she told them. "Human hands can adapt when machines can't." The council had already begun sending engineers to study the human weapons and equipment. They were amazed by how simple mechanical devices had defeated the Kreslak's sophisticated technology. Colonel Kelly watched with amusement as alien engineers examined an old M1A5 tank with wonder. "They act like it's magic," she said to Colonel Edwards. "It's just a gun on tracks." "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the hardest to see," Edwards replied. High Chancellor Zylos approached Captain Hayes, who stood a little apart from the others. "Captain," the alien said, "I must admit that I did not believe your species was ready to join the council. I thought humans were too violent, too unpredictable." Hayes looked at the alien calmly. "We are those things. We've fought terrible wars among ourselves, but we've learned from them. That's the difference." "What do you mean?" Zylos asked. "Your species has been at peace so long you forgot how to fight," Hayes explained. "Humanity remembers its wars. We carry those lessons with us. That's why we can have peace without being weak." News of the human victory spread quickly through the galaxy. On Earth and her colonies, people celebrated. The veterans who had fought on Nexus 4 were called heroes, but the old soldiers themselves didn't feel like heroes. They had simply done what needed to be done, as they had always done. 2 weeks later, the first official human delegation arrived at the Galactic Council headquarters. Young diplomats and scientists full of energy and new ideas, eager to join the interstellar community. Hayes watched them from the observation deck of the Remembrance. Miller stood beside him. "They look so young," Hayes said. "They are young," Miller replied. "But they'll do well. We've made a place for them. That's what old soldiers do, isn't it? Fight the battles so the young ones don't have to." On Earth, recruitment centers reported a strange trend. Young people were signing up for military service in record numbers, but they weren't talking about glory or adventure. They spoke about responsibility and protection. They wanted to learn from the old veterans before those veterans were gone. The Kreslak never returned to Council space. Reports suggested they had found easier targets in another part of the galaxy. The Council began building a new military force, one that combined their advanced technology with the battle-tested methods of humanity. And on a small hill overlooking the battlefield of Nexus Ridge, a simple stone monument stood. It carried the names of the 43 human veterans who had died there, along with a single sentence. Here, old human soldiers showed the galaxy that wisdom, courage, and sacrifice know no age. Captain Hayes visited the monument one last time before the Remembrance departed for Earth. He placed his hand on the warm stone and stood silently for a long moment. As he turned to leave, he noticed a group of young council cadets watching him, with respect in their alien eyes. They straightened when he looked at them, almost standing at attention. Hayes smiled. Perhaps this was the greatest victory of all, not just winning a battle, but teaching others what it truly meant to be a soldier. Not just fighting, but knowing why you fight and when to stop. The old human soldiers had stepped onto the battlefield, and the Galactic Council had indeed watched in awe. But more importantly, they had learned. As the Remembrance broke orbit and set course for Earth, Hayes took one last look at Nexus 4. One last battle, he whispered to himself. One that mattered.